Hello everyone, so today I'm gonna do an interesting video. I know that the topic I'm gonna talk about is unknown, maybe misunderstood, and it's just sensitive in general. The aim of this video is not so much gonna be about victimizing myself, it's really just gonna be about explaining my situation, what I've experienced. I might get a bit emotional, I'm not gonna cry, but I might get emotional, so usually that translates in me talking very quickly and kind of tripping upon my words, and I hope that's not going to get in the way of the message I'm going to try to convey in this video. But yeah, I'm just hoping I'm going to be able to express myself properly, because I sometimes have this thing in English that even though I'm fluent and you're going to think, yeah, he's fluent, I sometimes miscommunicate, I struggle to express myself really accurately, but I'm gonna try. I'm sure I'm gonna be fine, but it's still a bit of a stressful video because it's quite a vulnerable topic for me, because it's about my experience and some of the insecurities I've had regarding my language in the broad sense. So as you've seen in the title of this video, I'm going to talk about linguistic discrimination. And you might wonder, maybe, what linguistic discrimination is. And I can't blame you. It's not a very common topic. It's often unknown. But it really is real. It's something that's researched more and more in linguistics. And basically what it is when you use language in a broad sense to demean someone and make them feel inferior, or on the other way around, to make you feel superior. So the typical thing people will do is to make a judgment based on someone's accent, choice of words, maybe if they don't use standard grammar and other things. It's quite broad. To be a bit more specific, in England you have what we call standard British English, and it's seen as the prestige variety of English in England anyway. So it's associated with being, with sounding educated, attractive, smart, whatever connotations people might have with that variety. And anything that's different from the standard will be seen as uneducated, poor English, terrible grammar, anything negative like that, essentially. Okay, so I've simplified it a lot, but if you want something a bit more specific, you can check out Kelly E. Wright on Twitter. I will put everything in the description box below, but she's also done a lecture on linguistic discrimination, because that's a specialty. She's specialized in racial linguistics. And the lecture is super interesting. It will detail exactly what linguistic discrimination is in more detail. And she also did a case study, which was super interesting. Anyway, I recommend. It's really fascinating stuff. So now on to my experience. So I'm gonna need to give you a bit of background. So I am French, as you might have heard from my accent. Usually people can tell. But I'm also Portuguese, which is something that you can't always tell, I think. And basically, I grew up bilingual, so I'm a native bilingual, and that means that I grew up speaking French and Portuguese, so they are both my native languages. The reason why I'm bilingual is because my parents are both Portuguese, so they immigrated to France. Therefore, I am French. I was born in France, but I'm a son of Portuguese immigrants, so I'm also Portuguese. And growing up bilingual was, I don't know, sometimes I feel like people think that being bilingual is so cool, but when you grow up bilingual, it's normal. Like, I don't even know what it is like to be monolingual. Being bilingual has always been my reality, and I don't feel particularly special or genius about it, because it's not even something I've chosen. It just kind of was dumped onto me in a way. Not in a bad way. I'm grateful for being bilingual, but anyway. And what was interesting is that before I was a bit older, like 4 or 5, when you actually start to go to school and stuff. Maybe I went to school when I was 3. Anyway, but when you actually meet people in the community, young kids, babies essentially. Before then, I didn't realize that I was different. I say different like that because actually most of the world is bilingual, and speaking only one language is becoming unusual more and more. What I didn't explain though is that Portuguese people in France are quite a big community. I don't have numbers, I don't actually know them, but it is a big community, and French people know about Portuguese people being in France. And I think the reason is because from 50 to 25 years ago, there was a big immigration, a big Portuguese immigration. So now when you go to Paris, you see a lot of Portuguese speakers. It's quite a common language, which is quite different from England because, interestingly enough, and I will come back to this at the end of the video, in England, people don't have any sort of connotation of Portuguese people. They don't really know much about Portugal, to be honest. And all the stuff that people know are usually positive things, like, you know, the beaches or like the food or whatever, which is great. I'm grateful for that. But in France, it's not exactly the same. Portuguese food is actually seen as a joke because we eat codfish. So the joke all the time when I was a kid was, so you're gonna eat codfish tonight? That was, yeah, hilarious, right? Other things I would get was mocking my accent, even though I have no accent when I speak French, but still I'm Portuguese, therefore anyone that had a chance to do that would get a chance of making fun of my accent or my parents' accent. Again, hilarious. Can you tell I'm being sarcastic? Other things was that because I was French but also Portuguese, I was seen somehow as non-French because I was Portuguese, which makes no sense in a way. But that's how people saw it. So even though I didn't have any accent, I'm white, so I should be French or whatever, and then my ID says I'm French, then people still thought that I was foreign. And I said I'm white because usually Portuguese people tend to be quite tanned. My parents are, I'm not. Don't know why, but that's how it is. But yeah, so Portuguese people tend to be quite tanned, so yeah, I have the stereotypical looks of a French person. I think, I don't know, that's what people tell me. I don't really worry about this, to be honest. I don't care. I never worry about looking French, but anyway, I digress again. And that was a bit of a tricky period because that meant that in France, I didn't feel like I was really French, even though my entire life was in France and in French, in fact. And the other situation I was faced with is that in Portugal, I was also seen as the French guy, even though my parents were Portuguese. So even though my blood is entirely Portuguese, I was still seen as somehow French because I was white, because I have an accent when I speak Portuguese, etc., etc. So that meant that it was kind of a tricky time for me because when you're a teenager, like early on in your life, you don't question these things, you don't really think about your identity, but when other people criticize you, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, I didn't feel like I was... I just didn't know who I was, to be honest. I just wasn't sure if I was more French, more Portuguese. And often it's in the way people ask questions as well. So they're like, oh, where are you from? And my answer was French, but I'm also Portuguese. What do you mean? So like even these things, people couldn't sort of conceive or picture someone being from two countries, essentially from two origins. And often when people ask you what's your native language, they expect one answer, one language, when in fact, in my case, I can't say I have one native language because I have two native languages. I learned them at the same time. In fact, even though I'm more proficient in French, I'm pretty sure, logically, that Portuguese has been my first language because my dad, when I was born, had just moved to France like 1 or 2 years before, and my mom, she spoke Portuguese, so by default I'm pretty sure French was not the majority language in the house. Portuguese was. But anyway, where was I? So yeah, so my identity was kind of a bit of a mess. I'm okay now, you know, you don't have to reassure me. I know who I am now. When people ask me where I'm from, I always say French and Portuguese. I never pretend I'm French, which I used to. I used to hide behind the fact that I had a standard Parisian accent. I was white, so it's not obvious that I was Portuguese. I would not always say where I was from fully. I would always say I'm French, I'm from France or whatever. And also something else that made me non-French, I just realized, was my family name, because my name is Kevin, which in a way it is actually quite French in the sense that obviously doesn't come from France, you know, it's not originally a French first name, but it's become officially a French name now. But then my family name is fully Portuguese, so whenever I would give my name, people would know I wasn't French, and I could always tell, even if they didn't say anything, that it made me feel less French. And I don't know what to think about it. I didn't have time to sort of think about it, but I definitely think that your family name, names are kind of a window onto your identity, and it's sort of it's part of your identity essentially. It says something about you, positive or negative depending on the people, but it says something about you. And that's actually why I sometimes get annoyed when people question who I am based on my name or first name or family name. So it's not so much on my family name on my channel because no one knows my family name. But it's on my first name, so often people will be like, oh, if you're French, why are you called Kevin? And I'm like, oh, really? And I know people, maybe they do, but I feel like most people don't mean to be rude or anything, but it's just tiring. But I know the reason why I'm tired of this is because of my own experience, so I try to be forgiving. But Kevin is a French name. My name officially has an accent on the E, which makes it French because it's been adapted into French culture. And I hope I will not have to justify this again, but I know I will anyway. So, moving on a bit. My experience of growing up bilingual was kind of a tricky one because, my identity was being questioned, who I was as a person was being questioned because of the way I spoke or just the languages that I had, because in me it didn't translate so much into discrimination based on the words I used so much, but more on the languages that I speak. And if people heard me speaking Portuguese or just saying my family name, making fun of my family name, imitating the Portuguese accent, making fun of my parents because of their jobs, because they were stereotypically manual labor kind of jobs, etc., etc. So, and I know a lot of people are going to think, oh, come on, it's just a joke, it's not that bad. But I think if you experience, that kind of discrimination, then it's not like a one-off joke that's annoying. It's more, you have to put it into context of a person that's experienced it their entire life. So no, it's not funny when you make fun of my accent. No, it's not funny when you question my identity as a French person. And no, it's not funny when you make any comment related to the way I speak or the languages that I speak or who I am, my origins, anything. It's never funny. Honestly, I swear. Even if sometimes I would laugh to these jokes and maybe, people you make these comments to laugh, it's a laugh of discomfort most of the time because I don't feel like when I was younger I had the tools to deal with it. Now I do. So I wouldn't laugh, I would just actually address it. But when you're younger, you kind of get used to it, but in a sad way. Now I'm going to move on to something a bit different. So another type of linguistic discrimination I'm facing now is because I'm in England. And I wouldn't say it's as severe. It's just different, to be honest. It's not the same. And also because I'm older, I can cope with it better. So that does help. But in England, I experience linguistic discrimination, not because I'm Portuguese. In fact, people, which is a cool thing, they think it's cool that I'm Portuguese and French. They're always like, oh, it's so cool. And the first few times people said that to me, I was like, really? I'm cool? And because it generally never was how people made me feel in France. They never thought like, oh, that's cool. They'd just be like, oh, okay. Like, it's kind of seen as something normal or just meh kind of thing. I can't express it better. But in England, it's seen as something a bit more cool, which is nice. But the kind of discrimination I'm facing is more about the fact that I'm French. So it's kind of the same things, to be honest, in terms of discrimination. I mean, it's not the same, but it's a common thing, is people making fun of your accent, even though I do not have a very strong French accent, and I'm not going to go down to the level of imitating my own accent. I'm not going to do that. Lots of idiots in the media have done that for me already, so I don't have to. But yeah, making fun of the French accent is not funny. I know it sounds funny. Also, you guys do it wrong anyway, but it's not funny, I promise. And also, other things is, if I make a mistake, people will judge me, but this is more because I'm a foreigner. It doesn't make it okay, but I have an accent. I'm gonna make mistakes when I speak English. I'm sure I made a few mistakes talking now in this video. I guess the point of my video is just to make you aware that if you're gonna make jokes about accent or language, which I wish you didn't, but if you're going to do it, do not do it with people that can relate to this. Because what you're doing is, even if you don't mean to, you're demeaning the experience. And for sure, these people, it's not the first time they hear it. Your jokes have been heard many, many times. And it just makes these people stand out, and it's just not a cool thing because everyone wants to belong. So whenever you make someone stand out, especially in a mocking way, it's just not cool. And there's also other implications, you know. If someone makes mistakes when in terms of grammar, it might mean that, especially foreigners that just came to a country, it might mean that they didn't have access to education in that language. Maybe they just don't know how to learn the language, and that's the best they can do in terms of speaking, you know. Like when I speak Portuguese, I make lots of mistakes, and I really would hate, and people have made some comments on it, but I really hate when people make me feel like I'm not speaking Portuguese properly. I'm like, well, not my fault. I do what I can. And it can even be racist in some cases. I don't think in my case it would be called racism, more discrimination or xenophobia, but it can be racist because a lot of people can discriminate against you obviously because of the color of your skin, but also because usually, if I take quite a cliche sort of example, you know, you have African-American vernacular English, so black speech in America. And a lot of people will say things like ain't is not a word, which is a word. And if someone tells you it's not a word, they're not linguists, just so you know. I'm not angry at all here, right? And another thing is, you know, like, you know, using, you know, conjugating verbs differently and just generally speaking, not speaking the standard language will be a way for people to, you know, target you even more, especially if you're a minority. Same things for, you know, people criticizing the way some LGBT people speak. You know, if a man has a feminine voice, then they're going to be feminine, etc. So you have lots of connotations. What's kind of fascinating about linguistic discrimination is that it can be everywhere. And as Kelly E. Wright, that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, said, whenever you speak, linguistic discrimination is at play. Whenever you express yourself, you can be discriminated against based on that. I'm not saying that there isn't other sort of layers. So, you know, usually when you have linguistic discrimination, there's you also are often part of a protected minority, roughly speaking. So basically it can be a way. What am I trying to say? So for example, if you're black, the way you speak is going to be another opportunity for people to discriminate against you. If you have a handicap, for example, which impedes you from speaking normally, sorry, I don't have a better word right now, then it can be a way to discriminate against you, make fun of you. Same thing if you're a woman, you know, we know that more or less consciously, I mean, we know for sure in linguistics, but some people are aware more or less consciously that women will speak a certain way. And there are ways you can, or words or ways of speaking you can use to make fun of women. So, you know, people sort of know how to discriminate against people based on language. And it's just sort of a tool to just sort of reinforce a sexist, racist, homophobic, etc. attitudes. And I think that's why it's very serious as a topic. And yeah, I think that's kind of all I wanted to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. You know, I always thrive to give, to put value into my videos, and I hope you got any value, some value out of it. Let me know what you think. Even share your experience of being linguistically discriminated against. That'd be interesting to hear. Is there anything else I wanted to add? Yeah, I would end this video by saying, don't linguistically discriminate against people. You're not cool, you're not funny, you're just being a dick. You're making people feel shit. It might be cool between friends, so maybe keep it with your friends, but really just don't do it because that's not a good look. And if you really must make jokes about language or the way people speak, maybe don't do it in front of these people. That'd be the bare minimum, I think. But really just don't do it. Like, it's not cool. Not cool at all. Anyway, so that's it for this video. Again, I really recommend that you check Kelly E. Wright's work. I will put that in the description box below, and I will see you in another video. Bye!